Hello again, this is UML Operator. All right, we're taking a break from the usual entry-level and beginner Sparks sessions, moving into a more advanced session that assumes that you know how to use UML, what a class diagram is, class element, and potentially you've watched my previous videos on how to use Sparks Enterprise Architect, the tabs, and the ribbons. We're going to keep this a little simpler. We're going to be focused on a class diagram. We've created a project in our demo area called YouTube Content Delivery, and let's get started. So very simply, content delivery, we're going to use class elements, starts with an intro. So we're just going to type in intro here. We are going to have a subject. So because we've launched class element, Sparks remembers that. So all I have to do is hit Control and left click and it brings in another class element, right? We have content. I mean, that's the whole purpose, right? Content creators is to create content. And then eventually in our flow, we've got a recap. And then maybe we have a closing. All right, so those are, and let's align these. We're going to use layout. Top, and then space them apart evenly, right? And that's essentially the 5 steps in creating content in a basic level in YouTube or any content video channel. Now we could have used an activity diagram to show the flow. We could have used a BPMN, business process modeling notation, language, a diagram to show the flow, but I chose class elements. And the reason I did that is because I like to use class elements from an object-oriented design perspective, which has functions and data, nouns and verbs. Just don't want to digress or go too deep, but there's going to be a deeper meaning to this as we get further in our progression of how to model, especially when it comes into content creation. And then eventually we'll get into AI and machine learning and how we can use AI to actually generate our content, manage our content channels. But to get there, you're going to have to subscribe and follow to keep up as we work together. So what we're going to do now is we're going to show the relevance between these 5 elements, okay? Speaking of relevance, I want to talk about the associations between these and the association types. So from intro to subject, we're going to draw an association and we're going to use aggregation to part. And simply what this means, if you go to traceability and you select this element, intro is composed of subject. That's a true statement. So this relevance or this association is proper. There certainly are other types of associations, but I have another video on that subject. Now looking at aggregation and composition or composite, the relevance between subject and content in this case, if I draw an association and I chose composition to part, what this means if we go to traceability or relevance, that the subject is composed of content, all right? So in this case, I'm choosing the right association between these or the right relevance because subject, certainly it's true to say that subject is composed of content, but the reason for composition is subject goes away, content goes away, all right? And so that's the purpose of the closed diamond and the notion of composition or composite relevance. If intro goes away, subject doesn't go away. You can still start without an intro, although intro is important, as you all know, as content providers in moving between your introduction to the subject you're presenting to the content you're presenting. So what's the relevance between content that's being provided versus moving into a flow and what recap type content may be? So the association or relevance in this case that I would choose is aggregation. Again, the open diamond. If we look at traceability or relevance, content is composed of recap, and that's a true statement. And when we're looking at recap to closing, we're going to choose aggregation to part again. And this is a true statement. Recap, it's part of content and it's composed of some sort of closing. Now we're going to introduce the notion of generalization. In object-oriented development, this brings in inheritance, polymorphism, and those kind of technical terms you don't need to know. As a basic user, you're just understanding unified modeling language and how to use class elements to represent a flow in the system. So with the notion of generalization, you have many content parts that may inherit the parent content or the superclass within the content element. So in this case in Sparks, I grab content and I bring it in. Now, if I try to bring it in as a link, I'm going to get an error, and I don't want to do that. So when I bring it in, I have the option to bring it in as a child of content. I don't want to bring in objects. We don't want to go into that subject, but I can bring it in as a child. And with that child, you can certainly take the parent name. If I was to hit OK, I get this generalized relevance. So if I select this in traceability, the child is a subtype of the superclass, parent class, content, which is a true statement. But, I need to understand and break down what my content is. So in that particular case, I can go to the content element and I can give it a name. So in our particular subject, we're talking about delivering YouTube content with Sparks Enterprise Architect. I mean, that's the subject, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about the content being introduce class elements, right? Then we're going to go to content again, and we're going to bring in another element, and we're going to use child generalization, which Sparks remembers. And in this case, introduce relevance, right? Simply the lines between the items. And we can introduce other content as we're building our script, our narration, and our views, our B-rolls and things like that, right? Now you can use any modeling tool to do this. There's free ones out there. Won't mention them right now, but I'll be covering them in reviews. But the power of Sparks Enterprise Architect is that it gives you the ability to put your narrations, put your script, put your reference files in that you may be using, whether it's other videos or whether it's knowledge base information or anything that is supporting the content or the subject that you're presenting, right? So the other powerful thing in Sparks is that you can right click up here and or hit Control-0 as the shortcuts, go to Specification Manager, and you can actually type right here in a hierarchical manner what your script and flow is. So there's lots of other cool stuff you can do. Let me minimize this and go to Documents. I'm going to bring in this document type right here. Just drag it in here. I'm going to call it YouTube form, right? And then I'm going to double click to open it up, and I'm going to choose none. You can build templates, and I have templates I can share later and how to create templates. We're just getting okay. We have a blank area, and I've created a YouTube form for this that you pre-populate. You can fill in later. You can put in your title, your description, your chapters, and it pre-populates all the information necessary to deliver your content on YouTube in this case. Another thing you can do in Sparks is you can bring in a checklist. Let's go down to governance, and we're going to bring in a checklist. So you can create a checklist, and let's just call this production checklist, right? Call it anything you want. We're going to double click it and open it up. And all right, so you can start to populate things that you need to regularly do. Like for instance, you want to script the subject, right? That's one item you want to check off. You want to create a title, right? And I could go on and on. You can build a checklist of any type, and it can be check boxes, bullets, numbers, what have you, but I'm using check boxes. I'm gonna hit OK. So as I'm going through, I can check off that I've completed what's necessary to deliver content at various stages. In this channel, I'll be teaching you how to build patterns so you can reuse the way and the approaches that you do in creating content in a reusable manner. For example, we can go over here and we can bring in a pattern where we've already created a checklist we want to reuse of any type. All right. For instance, a pattern for this production checklist, we'll go to storyboard and patterns, and we'll use the production checklist where we can bring in the same checklist completed with the things that we think we need to do prior to delivery. So I'm going to go ahead and add this. I could drag and drop it in or bring it in this way, the same checklist. So as you complete things that you need to do, it lets you know when you're done or you have other things that need to be accomplished. Eventually, I'll be teaching you how to take patterns and build other patterns. So I'm going to call this one YouTube full content delivery. We're going to create a diagram, class diagram inside of it. So it's blank. And I will show you how to create a pattern of patterns. So we're going to go in here and we're going to simply right click and add, and we're ready to record. We have brought in everything necessary. I'm going to teach you about tag values and how to use those to orchestrate and organize your storyboards and any project delivery, patterns of patterns, how to use reusable patterns, and so on. Thanks very much for watching. This was fun. This was a nice fun break from the typical ritual I go through on a daily basis, but I wanted to get away from the basic content that I'm creating to help people get started to a little bit more advanced for those that are further ahead, what you can do with Sparks. And now you've learned how to do object-oriented design. How do you like that? Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.